Saturday's practice, I told the guys, it's going to be uncomfortable. The meeting is going to be uncomfortable. I'm not doing another 53 games like this.
The Lakers were embarrassed on Christmas Day. A 119-96 blowout loss to the Houston Rockets on the NBA's biggest regular season stage. And afterward, JJ Redick didn't just criticize the performance. He questioned whether his team even cared enough. But the most interesting part, he called out a player without ever saying their name.
It's a matter of making the choice. And too often we have guys that don't want to make that choice. And it's pretty consistent who those guys are. And so Saturday's practice, I told the guys, it's going to be uncomfortable. The meeting is going to be uncomfortable. I'm not doing another 53 games like this.
That line matters because Redick isn't talking about effort in a vague sense. He's talking about decisions, choosing to rotate, choosing to communicate, choosing to be locked in. And on Christmas Day, with the entire league watching, Redick essentially said, some players are choosing not to do those things. That's not a heat of the moment comment. That's a deliberate message. So, who is JJ Redick really calling out? Could it be Deandre Ayton? On Christmas Day versus the Rockets, Ayton played 36 minutes, which is the most any Lakers big man played. He scored 10 points on an efficient shooting night, making 5 out of his 6 shots. But he only grabbed 2 rebounds. For a starting big man playing that many minutes in a blowout loss, that number is impossible to ignore. The Lakers were beaten to loose balls, outworked in the paint, and consistently second to rebounds. When Redick talked about choice, choosing to compete, and being physical, performances like that inevitably draw attention. Rebounding isn't about shot making. It's about effort, anticipation, and presence. So, on the surface, that rebounding line feels like it fits the frustration Redick was expressing. But when you zoom out, the case doesn't fully hold up. Redick's frustration wasn't aimed at a one-off bad night. It was about patterns. He said it's pretty consistent who those guys are. And when you look at Ayton's season as a whole, he's actually been far more consistent than many expected. He's largely done his job, played his role, and given the Lakers steady production night to night. Another name that inevitably enters the conversation is Luka Dončić. And this one isn't about understanding the system, it's about defensive effort and transition habits, which have followed Luka for much of his career. Earlier this season, during the Lakers' 119-132 loss to the Spurs in the NBA Cup quarterfinal, Luka came under heavy scrutiny for his defense, particularly in transition. Stan Van Gundy openly criticized Luka on the broadcast, calling out his failure to get back on defense and the ripple effect it had on the Lakers' transition coverage. If you're listening to JJ Redick talk about choice, he could be talking about making the choice to sprint back, stay engaged, and not to switch off mentally. It is therefore easy to see why Luka's name even enters the discussion. Because transition defense isn't about scheme, it's about urgency. But here's the important part. While Luka has absolutely earned criticism for his defense in the past, this season has looked different. One of the big storylines coming into the year was Luka arriving in better shape, and that's translated directly to his defensive effort. He's been more active, more vocal, and more willing to compete on that end of the floor. And JJ Redick has publicly acknowledged that. After a win over the Spurs earlier in November, Redick even appreciated Luka's effort. Redick specifically praised Luka for staying active even while in foul trouble, finishing the night with 5 steals and 2 blocks, and continuing to compete instead of disengaging. Redick isn't pretending Luka is a lockdown defender, but he's acknowledging effort, engagement, and buy-in. And that makes Luka a tough fit for the unnamed criticism. He may still have lapses, but when Redick talks about players who don't want to make the choice, his own words suggest Luka has been making that choice far more often this season. Which again brings us back to the idea that this isn't about star players struggling with effort on a given night, but about someone else entirely. My money is on Dalton Knecht. And not because he's played badly or lacks talent, but because he fits every single detail Redick has given us. After his team gave up 132 points to the Phoenix Suns, including a staggering 62 points in the paint, Redick had this to say.
We had a guy the other day who hasn't played a lot who didn't know what a flood was in the middle of a game. So we're clearly, when we're not healthy and we haven't been healthy, we clearly have some room to grow in that area.
That one sentence narrows the field dramatically. Before we go any further, let's quickly explain what flood actually means. In basketball terms, A flood usually refers to a defensive concept where multiple defenders rotate aggressively to one side of the floor. The goal is to take away penetration, force the ball out of dangerous areas, and rely on quick communication and recovery to cover open space. This isn't a special play, it's a foundational defensive principle. So when a coach says a player didn't know what a flood was during the game, that's not about execution. That's about not knowing the language of the defense. Dalton Knecht isn't new, but his role is limited. So far this season, he's averaging around 14 minutes per game, he's in and out of the rotation, and he doesn't get long stretches to settle into rhythm. And on Christmas Day against the Rockets, he played just 3 minutes. Over the course of the season, defensive awareness has clearly been one of the biggest question marks in Knecht's game. There have been repeated stretches where he either gets lost in rotations, or reacts late to off-ball movement, or even hesitates in help situations. Sometimes, Knecht even makes the wrong read entirely. These aren't physical limitations. He has the size, strength, and athleticism to be a solid NBA defender. The issue somehow seems to be his defensive IQ and recognition. That also explains why Knecht's minutes fluctuate. Because when a coach doesn't fully trust a player defensively, the leash gets shorter, especially in high-profile games, and especially when the team is already struggling. At the end of the day, this isn't really about Deandre Ayton or Luka Dončić. And even with all the evidence pointing toward Dalton Knecht, this isn't about one player either. What JJ Redick is really calling out is a standard. When he talks about choice, he's talking about whether players choose to be prepared even when their minutes aren't guaranteed and stay mentally locked in on every possession. He wants the players to take responsibility when the game speeds up, and at the very least, know the terminology before they step on the floor. This happened on Christmas Day, on national TV, after another double-digit loss. However, Redick didn't explode emotionally. He didn't single anyone out by name. He delivered a message. And that message was simple. Talent isn't enough. The Lakers don't have a talent problem. They have a trust problem. Trust that everyone on the floor knows exactly what's being asked of them and will choose to do it. Whether Dalton Knecht was the specific player or not, the takeaway is clear. Opportunity in the NBA is tied directly to reliability. And right now, Redick is drawing a line. So let me ask you this. Do you think JJ Redick was calling out Dalton Knecht specifically, or was it someone else? Drop your answer in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more NBA deep dives like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And as always, thanks for watching.